to preserve the corridor that was at that time, because the land was allowed to be turned over into other uses other than as a transportation corridor. So the project to which he refers then, as a result of planning decisions, is not available. The project that we indicated that we're starting the planning on is one which is designed to alleviate congestion in that particular area. And Mr. Speaker, when the design work is completed, then we're in a position to understand the financial implications of the project. And at that time, it's appropriate to discuss finances.
The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid on your first supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I hope it doesn't take another 10 years to get to that point. Councillor Brad Johns and others have worked long and hard on pushing for this. And like myself, he is happy to see the beginning to this process, Mr. Speaker. The problem is that although the government says it will begin planning, it then throws the ball back into the municipality's court, Mr. Speaker. What we really have here is a political knee-jerk announcement by the department in response to a Daily News story dated November 1st, which I'll table, Mr. Speaker. So my question is, why does this government continue to play politics with road construction in this province?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And, you know, we tell the folks what we're going to do. We're going to plan seriously for something that's a very serious traffic congestion. We make that announcement known, Mr. Speaker, and the other side can't stand good news, so they call it politics. Well, if that's politics, Mr. Speaker, good politics.
The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this announcement, as it is little more than departmental propaganda, Mr. Speaker. There are no firm commitments. There's no firm dates. The people of Sackville want results, not more propaganda from this government. Why did this minister release the announcement without any real details or plans about this construction, Mr. Speaker?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member demonstrates how far they are from being in a position to govern, because they do not understand that before you can come forward with a plan, you need to design. And design is a very important part of constructing roads, Mr. Speaker. We are doing the design work, Mr. Speaker. When the design work is completed, we will commence the construction of that road, Mr. Speaker, and I can assure you people will be traveling on that road, Mr. Speaker, before the term of this government is out, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Kings West.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Health. Today a rally was held at the Halifax Public Library in support of autism, and parents and grandparents there were calling for the federal government to form a national autism strategy that will bring evidence-based treatments under the umbrella of Medicare. Parents of children with autism have approached this government in the past asking for support in their battle with the federal government to put a national strategy together. Unfortunately, these parents have only received lip service to their concerns and feel they are being left to fight this battle alone. My question to the Minister, will this government lend its support to parents of children with autism in this province and strongly encourage its federal brethren to implement a national autism strategy?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and to the member opposite, I thank him for this question and bringing the issue of autism to the floor of this House. I can say that we've been working hard, of course, through our programming, but of course I would support the families that are there and asking the federal government to come up with a national strategy when it comes to autism.
The honourable member for Kings West on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and certainly while the $4 million program has been a great help here in the province, much needed, and the parents of children with autism are grateful to have something, but it's simply not good enough. The existing program is well below national standards and only provides a fraction of what other provinces are providing. The existing Nova Scotia program only covers applied behavioural training costs for 1 year. Parents and children with autism need more than 1 year's assistance. Not only is the program limited to 1 year, but also if a child is older than 5 years of age, the program is not available at all. Autism is not something that can be cured in 1 year, and persons over the age of 5 with autism suffer just as much as those under 5. The program as it exists is simply not good enough. My question to the Minister: what will this government do for those parents of autistic children who do not qualify or have exhausted their 1 year of coverage under the existing program?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as the member opposite knows, that once a child, of course, gets beyond the age of 5 and goes into the school system, that there are programs and services available on that side of things. Of course, we're very proud of our EIBI program that helps out families tackle the issue of autism, helping their children develop communication. They learn how to play and other functional skills. Mr. Speaker, I know that we'll continue to work with those families to make sure that we have programming in place from here into the future.
The Honourable Member for Kings West on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And however, the medical community recognizes various behavioral therapies as being the best treatment options for autism. No provinces in Canada offer coverage of these treatment options under Medicare. Some provinces, like Nova Scotia, have introduced small programs that simply are not enough. Children with autism, like all other children, deserve the chance to be the best they can be. These children and families cannot be treated as second-class citizens. My final question to the Minister: will the Minister call on his federal counterpart to immediately bring forward a national autism strategy?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I know that I know, and this government knows full well of the incident of autism in Canada, the alarming incident here in Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, we'll continue to work with all partners. Mr. Speaker, I can even say in my own riding that I know of 2 families that each have 2 children. Not only having to deal with one, but of course 2 children within their family. And we want to make sure that we have the programming in place for them. And Mr. Speaker, I will continue to work with my honourable colleague, Tony Clement, in making sure that we push towards. And Mr. Speaker, we will continue at our federal provincial meeting. I believe it's happening the first week or so of December, and that will be brought to the table by this member.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question through you is for the Minister of Transportation. The work being carried out on Grand Lake Road is long overdue, but it is having a negative impact on direct hire, a small business that does the lion's share of its business in the months of October and November. Mr. Speaker, the work has been carried out without proper drainage being installed and is causing parking lot to flood when it rains. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister is: what recourse does this small business owner have in having this situation fixed?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and had the honourable member brought the matter forward, he's brought it forward, and I'll be glad to follow up on it with respect to any problems there are. Certainly the fact that we're out there doing as much work as we are does in fact create situations where at times there are some temporary inconveniences. We do the best we can to clear them up, but we've been very busy this year, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Nova on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when customers see a parking lot full of water, they're going to drive somewhere else where they'll stay dry. As well, delivery trucks are having difficulty getting in to deliver product. I will table a picture showing one such truck that was stuck blocking Direct Tire's driveway for over 3 hours and also clogging one of the busiest roads in the CBRM. So my question, Mr. Speaker, who is responsible for how this work was carried out, and is the responsibility with the department, or have they delegated responsibilities to the contractor?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I think the honourable gentleman is a fair-minded person and would appreciate that I'm not in a position to pass judgment as to who would have responsibility based on even a picture, Mr. Speaker. If the honourable member wants to sit down and open a discussion with members of my staff, I'll be very happy to make them available, and we'll get to the bottom of it, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Nova on your final supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I thank the minister for that offer. I will take him up on that offer, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the way the road is now designed, water runoff collects in direct hires parking lots, trucks can't deliver product, and this business is suffering as a consequence. My question is, what action is the minister going to take to help the owner of direct hire deal with this current situation and to help compensate him for his losses?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I think I've made an offer to the honourable gentleman that would deal with that.
The Honourable Member for Kings West.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Health. This is Jody Bradbury. She's a young mother of two very young boys and a proud spouse of a member of our Canadian Armed Forces. Ms. Bradbury and her family were recently posted to CFB Greenwood from Gagetown in June 2006, and her husband is now in Alberta preparing for deployment in Afghanistan. Ms. Bradbury has been suffering from a very personal but painful affliction. Ms. Bradbury is in need of breast reduction surgery. Her physician agrees that she would be a good candidate for this surgery and that it would be a tremendous help to improve her painful symptoms. But in order to qualify for funding from the Department of Health for this surgery, the surgeon has to be able to remove 500 grams from each breast. My question to the minister, what is the government's justification for setting such a high threshold for approval of breast reduction surgery in this province?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I do know that there are some rigorous rules around who qualifies and who doesn't qualify, Mr. Speaker. I know most of those, I know all of those have been clinically proven. I would offer to the member opposite that I can go and see what exactly those rules are and report back to him.
The Honourable Member for Kings West on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, Ms. Bradbury is in the House today, and I must acknowledge her bravery for coming forward with her personal story in the hopes of helping not only herself, but many other Nova Scotia women who are in the same situation. Ms. Bradbury has been advised that the province has plans to increase the minimum threshold for considerations of breast reduction surgery to 700 grams. These amounts are extreme. No other province in this country has set such high and unrealistic criteria. In fact, only Quebec and Manitoba set threshold limits at all. Most provinces assess each patient on a case-by-case basis. Much smaller amounts than that which the province is contemplating could be a tremendous help to many women in this province. My question to the minister, how can this government justify increasing the threshold even higher, keeping this much-needed and medically necessary surgery out of the reach of Nova Scotia women?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I have to admit that I don't know all the details about this issue. I can say that I can go back and get those details for the member opposite. I am not aware at all of changing that threshold.
The Honourable Member for Kings West on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Breast reduction surgery is not a question of vanity. It's a question of quality of life. Women in need of this surgery are in constant pain in their neck, back, shoulders, and chest. Breathing problems, such as asthma, are aggravated even further. Decisions cannot be made on the necessity of this surgery based solely on the amount to be removed. If a woman is in need of this surgery and a lesser amount than 500 gram threshold the province has set would be helpful, then that should be enough. Besides, the more tissue removed during surgery increases the possibility for complications and blood loss. Why create more pain and a longer recovery period than is absolutely necessary? My final question to the Minister, will the government reconsider its criteria for breast reduction surgery and help Ms. Bradbury and other women in Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I can say to the member opposite that I do know that physicians and specialists, of course, look at this on a very close basis, making sure that all criteria are met. Maybe the criteria are too stringent, as the member does allude to. Again, I will commit to the member opposite to review that information and report back to them as soon as I can.
The Honourable Member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question to you is to the Minister of Transportation. The Nova Scotia Road Builders Association is 120 member companies and directly employs 7,500 Nova Scotians. The association has consistently stated that early tender calls are critical to timely tender completion. In May of this year, the minister announced that the West Branch Road in Pictou County would be repaved. However, the tender was not called until late summer and awarded on September 19th of this year. So, Mr. Speaker, what can this minister tell the residents of the West Branch and River John area on why the tender was called so late that it made it impossible for the contractor to complete it this year?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as I've indicated earlier, we have had a very significant road program this year. And the honourable member would appreciate that the road builders are limited and, in fact, are sort of playing a catch-up game with respect to being able to do all of the work that we're putting out there. So it's necessary for us to spread the work out throughout the entire construction season. That means that some roads begin early, Mr. Speaker, and other roads begin later. And unfortunately, sometimes the weather catches up with contractors, and work that they had hoped to complete doesn't get completed. I can assure the honourable member that work will be completed as quickly as possible when the construction season resumes.
The honourable member for Pictou West on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the Canadian Automobile Association said earlier this month that poor road conditions are undermining important elements of our economy, such as trade, tourism, commute times, and the environment. In Pictou County, Stoneham Chalets near Scottsburn and Pictou Lodge near the PEI Ferry have had guests concerned about the poor quality of local roads leading to these destinations. So my question, through you, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, when can you offer hope to these tourism operators that these poor quality roads will no longer be affecting their businesses?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And when we became the government of this province, Mr. Speaker, the capital program was somewhat more than $40 million a year, not much more. We have gradually increased that year after year, Mr. Speaker, and our program last year was over $200 million, Mr. Speaker, as capital construction. The huge deficit in road repair that we inherited is something that we have been working at steadily, Mr. Speaker. We're making progress, and we intend to keep spending and making capital construction the priority of this government so that our roads will improve. And I can say to the honourable member, I hope that the roads he references will be done in the near future.
The honourable member for Pictou West on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we're certainly all affected by poor quality roads in this province. Recently, the Nova Scotia Chamber of Commerce held a roads and highway symposium in Truro to try to get some answers, amongst other things, to the acute problems associated with our secondary roads. And one of those problems, I know personally, is being experienced by the Caribou Fire Department near the town of Pictou, who indicate that response times to emergencies are hampered by poor road conditions. So, Mr. Minister, what can you tell those firefighters in the Caribou Fire Department that are being slowed down by poor quality roads?
Safety issue. Safety.
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I can tell the honourable member and all members of this House that this government intends to make the repair and enhancement of the quality of our roads in this province a priority of the government, and we will, Mr. Speaker, every year ensure that we can put as much capital toward the improvement of our roads as we possibly can. We have demonstrated that with our records from '99 to date, Mr. Speaker, and Nova Scotians can look forward to us continuing that emphasis in the future.
The honourable member for Waverley Fall River Beaverbank.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Transportation and Public Works. Mr. Speaker, the minister's spokeswoman was quoted in yesterday's Chronicle Herald as saying that the paving on Perrin Drive has been deferred to March 2007 because of budget constraints. I am sure this will come as a surprise to the vast majority of residents who received a letter from my predecessor dated May the 5th of this year, which I will table, stating the minister's assurance that the roadworks would be completed this fall. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask the minister why this pre-election promise was broken.
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and all honourable members of the House would recall that as the construction season proceeded last year, we encountered challenges that had not been fully anticipated. One of those challenges, of course, was the wage rates that have to be paid to workers in order to keep them here in the province. But the biggest thing was and even though we had allocated a significant amount of money in our budget to account for it, but the increase in liquid asphalt prices was something that was far beyond what was anticipated, and that meant that there were a few projects in the province, Mr. Speaker, that had to be deferred to next year. And Mr. Speaker, I can assure all honourable members that any projects that were deferred to next year will in fact be done next year.
The Honourable Member for Waverley Fall River Beaverbank on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, some of the residents of the Perrin Drive area have been waiting for over 4 years for the road to be double chip sealed. They have encountered nothing but broken promises. I'd like to table letters from the Minister and the Minister of Finance confirming that these urgent roadworks would take place in the 2006 construction season. Mr. Speaker, would the Minister explain to the people of Fall River why they have been subjected to so much election propaganda and so little action in this matter?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I refer all honourable members to the construction program which we had last year. But there were challenges that I've indicated, and as a result of those challenges, Mr. Speaker, a number of projects were delayed until next year. But, Mr. Speaker, I can assure all honourable members and folks living on roads where there has been a delay that we will be looking at those roads early in the next year.
The Honourable Member for Waverley Fall River Beaverbank on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, a school bus travels up and down this road 4 times a day, and the parents of the children traveling in this bus live in fear of a major accident. Members of the Perrin Neighborhood Association tell me they spend thousands of dollars every year on car repairs, and all they get from the government is excuses based on the minister's inability to forecast the price of asphalt. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask the minister, how can the residents of Fall River be sure that the latest completion date for Perrin Drive is not just another empty promise?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Based on the record of this government, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Health. Digby Annapolis is one area of Nova Scotia with a large number of elderly people, and this number is growing. This area is lacking in many ways. There's a lack of doctors, a lack of room in seniors' nursing homes, a lack of assisted living homes, and a lack of palliative care. We are thankful for a few more beds that are to open in our wonderful little hospital, but without doctors, nurses, and nurse practitioners in our area, it won't matter how many beds are in that hospital. This situation is growing worse every day. My question to the minister is, does the Department of Health have Digby high on the priority list for doctors and nurse practitioners?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, as all areas in Nova Scotia are number one with this government, and I can say to the member opposite that we'll continue to work with the community, to work with South Shore Health or Southwest Health to make sure that they have the facilities and, of course, the personnel in which to offer those services. Mr. Speaker, I can also speak to the success that we have had, of course, on the islands, just down from Digby, of course, with the nurse practitioner project. Of course, that has turned into a full-time position, and of course, we'll continue to work with those communities to find the right services in the right areas.
The honourable member for Digby Annapolis on your first supplementary.
That nurse practitioner's been there for a long while, but we need a lot more. We have just lost another doctor out of Digby who's gone to PEI. His leaving seemed to stem from a malfunction in the sponsorship program this province has in place. This doctor looked after over 3,000 patients in the Digby-Annapolis area. Now these patients don't even get to see a doctor at outpatients department. They are being told to go elsewhere. We have a handful of doctors left in Digby who are overworked and are ready to retire. Our situation in Digby is at a critical stage. People without doctors don't know where to turn, so they are calling me. My question to the minister: can the minister direct his department to take a serious look at the situation in Digby, and soon?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I said yesterday during a course of questioning, of course, with family physicians in this province, most urgent vacancies appear to be in Barrington Passage, Bridgewater, Milton, Digby, and Colchester. And Pictou counties, the vacancies had a total complement out of 800 family physicians in this province. About 22 are showing openings. Positive, I'm going to read here, but positive side has some stability. We'll continue to work with those district health authorities to make sure that recruitment continues well into the future to fill those pieces in.
The honourable member for Digby Annapolis on your final supplementary.
You know, Digby is in the media probably more than any other place in this province for emergency room closures. With our few elderly doctors we have left in Digby ready to retire, we see this situation getting much worse to the point of full closure. My question to the minister: with a situation of a growing number of patients, a declining number of doctors, would a place like Digby be eligible for applying to Doctors Without Borders for help?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I can say that the organization the member speaks about is a wonderful organization that helps out millions of people worldwide. But I can say that right now within Nova Scotia that we are addressing this issue by working through our CAP assessment program, working with our partners at Dalhousie, making sure that we have those physicians going into the future. Mr. Speaker, and also talk about our commitment to the Bear River Clinic that not only will help out in seeing people in that area, but also help out in making sure that health promotion happens in that area as well, making sure that we make our citizens the healthiest possible province in Canada.
The honourable member for Halifax Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the minister responsible for the Insurance Act. Mr. Speaker, as we all know, the principal feature of the government's auto insurance reform was to limit benefits to accident victims in order to return the insurance industry to profitability. What none of us knew at the time, Mr. Speaker, was that the insurance industry was actually doing just fine. And 3 years later, their profits from auto insurance in Nova Scotia are large and growing. Between 2001 and 2005, claims dropped by $60 million in Nova Scotia, while premiums climbed by $125 million. Meanwhile, though, Nova Scotians injured in motor vehicle collisions are still stuck with the cap. My question to the minister: when will the government undertake a review of industry profits and compare those profits to the plight of Nova Scotians suffering under the damages cap?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians received a 20% reduction in insurance premiums as a result of this government's decision. That has been a benefit to Nova Scotians, and insurance premiums in Nova Scotia are continuing to drop.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Fairview on your first supplementary.
Of course, the minister knows that wasn't the question. This is about Nova Scotians suffering under the cap while the industry makes very large profits. Let me give an example. 2 weeks after this government enacted the cap, a woman driving with her children was struck by another vehicle. Since the accident, she is still unable to use her right hand to undertake the simplest of tasks. Her family members must do them on her behalf. She is unable to work, suffers from recurrent migraine headaches, and the reduced income in their household means that they are under the threat of losing their home. But under the auto insurance bill, her injuries are classified as minor. Under the old system, she would have received tens of thousands of dollars in damages. Can the minister please explain to the House why this Nova Scotian and her family should continue to suffer in order to correct a non-existent profitability crisis in the auto insurance industry?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much. And for the honourable member, the issue here is Nova Scotia had to make changes in the system of liability for minor injuries in order to ensure that the price of insurance for Nova Scotians is reasonable. Mr. Speaker, we have dropping insurance rates that are benefiting all Nova Scotians, and that is why we made the changes we did.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Fairview on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the government at the time was trying to strike a balance, and we opposed that, but we understand that's what they were trying to do. What I'm saying today, Mr. Speaker, is 3 years later, we know that the balance has not been struck correctly because the industry is far more profitable today than anybody foresaw then. In fact, the evidence that we have now is that they were far more profitable at the time than even they thought or any of us in this House believed. So we're asking the government to look at it again to restrike the balance. My final question to the minister: when will this government undertake a review of insurance industry profits as compared to the suffering of Nova Scotians under the cap so that they can once again get the balance right?
The Honourable the Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and again to the honourable member. What we have in Nova Scotia is an insurance scheme which is fair to Nova Scotians. It guarantees that Nova Scotians who suffer from serious injuries are compensated. It guarantees that the vast majority of Nova Scotians have affordable insurance premiums, and we believe that the system is overall a very good system.
The Honourable Member for Shelburne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister responsible for the Department of Fisheries and Agriculture, which may soon become an office. Mr. Speaker, our coastal communities are striving to prosper, and one of the keys to this success or failures will be the fisheries and the people employed in the fishery. Mr. Speaker, one way we could increase employment in the fisheries would be to get more people working on inshore fishing boats. However, one of the impediments of this are that the WCB rates captains must pay. Mr. Speaker, what action will this minister undertake to help inshore fishermen deal with this issue?
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member opposite for the question. And he is indeed right. We do consider the fisheries very important to the province of Nova Scotia, but the issue as far as WCB rates, I would have to refer to the Minister of Environment and Labour.
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I realize that WCB rates are higher than they should be in different industries across Nova Scotia. The benefits are also lower than they should be, Mr. Speaker, and that is why several years ago, when the WCB board was in trouble, this government stepped in and put in a new governance system that has decreased the underfunded liability and that has increased benefits. And we're continuing to move in the right direction, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Shelburne on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, currently the Nova Scotia Workman Compensation Rate book charges $7.19 per $100 of payroll. Mr. Speaker, that is a lot of money, and is blocking many captains from hiring that extra deckhand. These rates are too high, and I know it is not based on the safety record of the inshore fleet. The problem is that the inshore fleet is lumped in with the offshore fleet who are going out for days or even weeks at a time. Mr. Speaker, the solution seems simple, and I ask the minister, will he work to separate the inshore from the offshore fleet?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, I've stated before that the Workmen's Compensation Board has a governance, an independent board that has employees and employers on it. They have been doing an excellent job, Mr. Speaker, and they have turned around the WCB and are moving everything in the right direction. However, for the benefit of the honourable member, I would be happy to write a letter to ask for the rationale on the separation or the lumping together of these two fisheries.
The honourable member for Shelburne on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that may be a good start, but this indeed would be a very good move. And to illustrate that, I will table page 22 of the PEI Workmen's Compensation Board's rate book. And PEI, inshore fishing, has been given its own rate. In PEI, they are paying $4.61 per $100 payroll. This is 36% less than our inshore fishermen in Nova Scotia. My question, Mr. Speaker, will the minister call for immediate review to examine how these groupings are determined and work to achieve a better rate for Nova Scotia inshore fishing fleet?
What a difference.
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Mr. Speaker, I've already indicated in my previous reply that I'll ask for the Workers' Compensation Board to give to me their policy on this. But I really want to reiterate here because it's very, very important. The Workers' Compensation Board was almost broke when we came into government, and we have turned it around through a proper governance structure, and we are very proud of that fact, and we will continue to move forward with bringing down the rates to employers and bringing up the benefits to employees.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Mr. Speaker, municipal councillors, business leaders, and residents of the Strait area, along with the MLA for Richmond, have for many years called upon the provincial government to complete the twinning of Highway 104 from Truro to Cape Breton. Mr. Speaker, recent statistics from the Department of Transportation show that Highway 104 from Truro to Cape Breton is the most dangerous section of highway in Nova Scotia. The last time any asphalt was put down to extend the twinning of Highway 104 between Truro and Cape Breton was in 1998-1999 under a Liberal government when the twinning to New Glasgow was completed. Therefore, my question to the Minister of Transportation is when should the residents of the Strait area expect to see the complete twinning of Highway 104 between New Glasgow and the Cancel Causeway?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the honourable member for the question. We have, in fact, have work ongoing now at the Thorburn interchange. Mr. Speaker, that will enable us to be in a position to let contracts for the twinning of that section of the road, and we hope to have that underway in the near future.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, business leaders in the Strait area have worked hard to grow our economy and attract new businesses to the area in places such as Point Tupper and the Goldboro industrial parks. Speaker, such economic growth requires proper transportation infrastructure. Residents have waited since 1999 and still no extension on the twinning of Highway 104 other than some brush cutting and now finally an overpass with no road leading to it. Mr. Speaker, the growth of the Strait area requires a safe and reliable highway system. Therefore, my question again to the Minister of Transportation and Public Works, what work will be undertaken to complete the twinning of Highway 104?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Surely, Mr. Speaker, the honourable member doesn't trivialize the need for clearing of a right-of-way. He's not suggesting that he would begin paving over trees and woods and such.
That's not a good idea.
The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party on your final supplementary.
Well, you know, Mr. Speaker, I know that my colleague from Digby Annapolis has long complained about the growth of alders in his riding, but for the resident Strait area to have waited 7 years under a Tory government to finally see that they're going to cut the brush and cut the trees in the way of putting a road, I think is asking a bit much. Mr. Speaker, growth of the economy in the Strait area also requires a safe and reliable transportation route from the Canso Causeway to Cape Breton Regional Municipality, especially in the Sydney area. Boat Route 105 and Route 4 are in many areas unsafe and in need of significant repair. So my question to the Minister of Transportation is, when can the residents of Cape Breton and the Strait area expect a new, safe highway linking the island from the Canso Causeway to the Cape Breton Regional Municipality?
The Honourable Minister of Transportation and Public Works.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I can assure the honourable member and all members of the House that the twinning of that section of road in this province is a fundamental priority of this government. It is something that we intend to see begin and see completed, Mr. Speaker, and I can tell the honourable member that we are in the process of doing very important planning. The design work at the bypass at Annikanish, number 104 bypass. That design work will be completed in another year, Mr. Speaker. That would leave us in a position to be able to call contracts, Mr. Speaker, in 2008, 2009 for that particular section. The sections at Sutherland's River, Mr. Speaker, those sections will be ready to go to contract in the very near future, Mr. Speaker, and I hope as early as next year.
The Honourable Member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question through you is to the Minister of Education. This morning I had the opportunity to hear Don Connolly do an interview on Information Morning with the Minister of Education. And this morning the Minister of Education was relaying the fact that she had visited a number of schools about the conditions of these schools. During the interview, she confirmed that she had visited Centre Consolidated and Dartmouth High to see the condition of these schools and referred specifically to these two schools. I was wondering if the minister could confirm the dates that she visited Centre Consolidated and Dartmouth High.
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, to member opposite, I think everyone in this House knows that I've spent 35 years in education. That's taken me into a lot of schools. I've spent 5 months as Minister of Education. That has not taken me into a lot of schools, but I have been in both of those schools.
The Honourable Member for Timberley Prospect on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The school advisory chair, Barry Eisner of Central Consolidated, is not pleased. He heard the same interview that I heard, and he confirmed with our office that the minister's staff had cancelled the visit to Centre Consolidated a few days before the 30th of October when it was scheduled to take place. Will the minister confirm at this time, did she or did she not visit Centre Consolidated, or was the meeting in fact cancelled?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, to the member opposite, Barry Eisner has communicated with our department on several occasions. There was, in fact, a scheduled visit on October 30th, and yes, in fact, that was cancelled.
The Honourable Member for Timberley Prospect on your final supplementary.
So I can be clear on the fact that when we speak to Mr. Eisner later today, when the reference was made during the Information Morning piece this morning by Mr. Connolly, about the condition of this particular school that's been neglected for such a long time, that have highlighted the fact that the minister said that she had seen Centre Consolidated's situation and she had seen how poor it was. We can confirm that she has not been there. So the obvious question that the people, the obvious question to the people of Centre Consolidated, the obvious question the people from Centre Consolidated and Mr. Eisner want to confirm is, when will this minister visit their much neglected school?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, to the member opposite, I will repeat, Mr. Eisner knows and this House knows I did not attend a meeting at that school on October 30th. I did, however, visit that school in my earlier life. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Needham.
Speaker, through you, my question is to the Minister of Community Services. Mr. Speaker, Bloomfield Centre is a multi-purpose community centre in north central Halifax, home to many social justice groups who provide programs to many people. Groups like the Elizabeth Fry Society, People First, the Halifax branch of CHMA, the Association for Independent Living and Street Feet, the Voice of the Poor, to name a few, Mr. Speaker. The centre, a former school, is owned and operated by HRM, who have declared it surplus property and a financial burden to the municipality. And a process is now underway to move the organizations out of this centre. My question through you, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister is, what is your department doing to ensure that the many social agencies who work out of the Bloomfield Centre aren't forced into inappropriate locations or in settings where higher rents eat into their ability to maintain the current program levels?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my honourable colleague for the question. Certainly, the groups that my honourable colleague mentioned do some phenomenal work, Mr. Speaker, in our communities and across this province. Certainly, the decision of HRM is one that is out of my hands, Mr. Speaker, but I certainly will ask staff to update me on the progress of the discussions that are going on with these individual groups, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Needham on your first supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my second question is to the Minister of Health Promotion. In addition to the various social groups, Bloomfield Centre has a large gymnasium used extensively for adult recreation. And I note with great interest, Mr. Speaker, that the Minister's department financially contributed to the HRM review of Bloomfield Centre, which will result in its closing. So, Mr. Speaker, I would like if the Minister could commit here today that there will be no reduction in recreational facilities available to residents of North and Central Halifax if Bloomfield Centre closes.
The Honourable Minister of Health Promotion and Protection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What I will commit is that we here at Health Promotion and Protection do a good job, I believe, in providing support for community groups, organizations, and municipalities. In this case, we have partnered very closely with Halifax Regional Municipality. We'll continue to do that so that recreation services can be provided to all constituents of Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Needham on your final supplementary.
Thanks very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to go back to the Minister of Community Services. Mr. Speaker, multi-purpose service centres have proven to be effective models for providing health and social services, business incubation, arts skills, and arts cooperatives. And it's unfortunate that this is a fact that's been lost on HRM. A group of concerned citizens, Imagine Bloomfield, have come together to develop a vision and a plan to retain Bloomfield Centre as a multi-purpose centre for the community. So my final question for the Minister of Community Services is this. Is your department willing to become familiar with Imagine Bloomfield with a view to working collaboratively with them to ensure that social justice groups in our community can continue to have a place to provide services in a multi-service setting?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And to my honourable colleague across the way, I appreciate her bringing this to the floor today. Mr. Speaker, certainly the groups that my honourable colleague mentioned, as I said before, do some great work in the communities, and I'd be more than pleased to learn more about their concept of this multi-purpose service centre, and I would look forward to meeting with those groups and meeting with the honourable colleague to learn more, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations. Mr. Speaker, 3 years ago, the County of Annapolis and the town of Bridgetown sent their top infrastructure priorities to the federal and provincial governments. Given the state of the current fire hall, the county and the town of Bridgetown came together to set a new fire hall as their #1 priority, asking both levels of government to each provide 1/3 of the total cost of the building of a new fire station under the Canada-Nova Scotia Municipal Rural Infrastructure Funding. The town of Bridgetown has been told that the fire hall does not qualify for infrastructure funding any longer. So my question to the minister is, was it the provincial or federal government who decided that fire halls no longer qualified for infrastructure funding?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, I don't know whether fire halls ever qualified under those programs, but I can tell the honourable member it was the federal government who said that that particular fire hall did not qualify.
The Honourable Member for Annapolis on your first supplementary.
Other fire halls qualify and just Bridgetown doesn't qualify. I think what he's saying that fire halls don't qualify, and it was his department on March 30th that notified the town of Bridgetown that they no longer qualified under the program, even though they qualified under the previous program. So, Mr. Speaker, thanks to the generosity of the people of both communities who donated money towards the construction of a new fire hall, the municipality has come up with the required 1/3 of funding. But, Mr. Speaker, they need the other 2/3 to proceed with the construction. Firefighters in Bridgetown are working in cramped quarters in an outdated and unsafe building. So my question to the minister is, what is your government doing to convince the federal government to allow fire halls to be part of the infrastructure funding program?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, the rules were changed by the federal government, and indeed the reason that our department would have notified the municipality that the fire hall was not eligible is because communication generally goes from our department to the municipalities who make the applications.
The Honourable Member for Annapolis on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The question was, what is your government doing to convince the federal government that fire halls should be part of an infrastructure program? These communities are all over Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. There are communities across this province that require a safe and modern fire hall. Mr. Speaker, if they are all told they no longer qualify for the funding, what are these communities supposed to do? So my question to the minister is, what is he telling those communities that are looking for funding to build new and modern fire halls in Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, now that the honourable member has mentioned that, I do remember that the community which I represent did benefit from one of those federal municipal programs, and their fire hall received a part of that. Mr. Speaker, the federal government changed the rules. I will check with my staff. I'm quite happy to write to the federal government and ask them to change the rules back. But as the honourable member would know, or at least some honourable members will, is that these programs are developed for a specific period of time. They aren't going on forever and a day. So there is a new program being developed now, and perhaps, Mr. Speaker, fire halls are included in that. I will find out.
The Honourable Member for Sackville, Cobequid.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Health. This government has been making empty promises regarding the establishing of a province-wide palliative care program. The Minister of Health's report to Nova Scotians in 2003 and 2004 committed to working on a consistent approach to palliative care in the next year. That didn't happen, Mr. Speaker. Former Premier John Hamm promised in April of 2004 to phase in a palliative care program. That didn't happen, Mr. Speaker. So my question to the Minister of Health, 2006 is nearly over. Where is the provincial palliative care program his government promised?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I can say that over the last number of months that we've been working with district health authorities in order to make sure that we have at least a common level of palliative care across the province. I can say that that for a number of months before I became Minister of Health, that we did work with the department at that time to make sure that we had a palliative care program in Yarmouth, who of course was under service for a long period of time. So myself and the Honourable Minister of Economic Development worked very hard to make sure that we had that program. And I can say that across the province that there was no necessarily a standard nor a level that made sense. So over the last number of years, last year or so, we've been trying to balance the palliative care programs across this province.
The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, this government has chosen to deflect action on palliative care, the way it has with so many issues, by conducting study after study while doing nothing to deliver on its promises, Mr. Speaker. The Provincial Palliative Care Report was released in the fall of 2005, but it remains in draft form, Mr. Speaker, not released to the public. There are no province-wide standards for palliative care, so what one district calls palliative care is a completely different experience than what another district may offer, Mr. Speaker. So I ask the Minister of Health, will he table the 2005 palliative care report in the legislature today?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I can say that all Nova Scotians who need end-of-life care should have access to the same level, no matter regardless of where they live in this province. I can say, Mr. Speaker, that over the last year, expansion of palliative care services is a priority through our continuing care strategy. We are investing an additional $832,000 the current fiscal year, looking forward to $2.2 million in 07-08 for the delivery of enhancing the continuing care palliative care benefits across Nova Scotia.
The honourable member for Sackville-Cobequid on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I don't think the Minister of Health answered my question or doesn't want to answer the question. It was, will he table the report today in this legislature? And I guess he's answered no, Mr. Speaker. Years of empty promises have meant that thousands of Nova Scotians with terminal illnesses and their families went without the support and programs that they should have been able to access, Mr. Speaker. We all know, Mr. Speaker, a hospital bed is not only the least desirable place, Mr. Speaker, to die, but it's also the most expensive. My question to the Minister of Health, when will the empty promises stop and a provincial program with universal standards of palliative care be adopted for the province of Nova Scotia?
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I mean, that member opposite can come and say the things that he wants on the floor of this legislature. He can reference things that we are working on. I can reference things that I'm working on. I can say, Mr. Speaker, that we're working hard on palliative care, making sure that we have a program that's based on data, that's based on responsibility. And Mr. Speaker is making sure that we're helping the people that so dearly need it, making sure that through end-of-life experiences that we can help make that the best we can possibly make it, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question will be for the Premier. Mr. Speaker, the Premier made it clear in the last election that he supports building sidewalks to ensure that children are safe while walking to school. In my constituency, there are two schools that are on roads directly off the number 2 highway, and these schools are the Enfield District Elementary School and the Elmsdale District Elementary School. The number 2 highway has a sidewalk, but these roads that the schools are actually located on do not. So my question for the Premier, Mr. Speaker, when are you going to fulfill your commitment to keeping families safe and build sidewalks so that children in these communities can walk to school safely?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And what the government committed to do was to review the issue of safe walkways to school, and the government will keep that commitment, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Hants East on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If ever there was a non-answer, I think the Premier would already know that there are unsafe areas. I'm identifying one for him, and yet he refuses to act to correct it. Mr. Speaker, providing children with sidewalks to walk on when going to school is not simply a safety issue, but is also a health promotion issue. In light of this, my next question is for the Minister of Health Promotion and Protection, who during October encouraged students to participate in International Walk to School Week, a program designed to encourage healthy living for students. So my question to the Minister, Mr. Speaker, can you explain why there are no sidewalks on the roads to these elementary schools, limiting the safe places for these children to get exercise?
The Honourable Minister of Health Promotion and Protection.
Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member would know, that sidewalks in the province of Nova Scotia, at least for the most part, are the responsibility of municipalities. But I'll say this, that we're the first province in Nova Scotia to have an injury prevention strategy. I'm very proud of the work that we've done to ensure that kids have an active and healthy lifestyle. And those two things obviously have some kind of conflict, but we continue to work with municipalities to ensure that sidewalks are built where they're absolutely necessary, and that's in areas close to schools.
The Honourable Member for Hants East on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My final question will go to the Minister of Education, who is responsible for the safety of our children while at school. And the Minister mentioned earlier in a previous answer about her previous life, and I wanted to remember her previous life when I helped her on a number of issues regarding these schools. And I know, I thought she appreciated my efforts in those regards. So my question for the Minister, will you tell this House when you will build sidewalks on roads leading from highways to schools to increase the safety of children walking to school?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, to the member opposite, yes, I do remember when we worked together, and you understand that we appreciated your support and your effort. That's translated into two good schools in particular that we worked on. So I'd like to publicly thank you for that. Secondly, in answer to your question, I believe the sidewalk issue is a municipal responsibility. When we went through the planning sessions, we did have municipalities at the table, and they did contribute to the building of those sidewalks.
The Honourable Member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Economic Development. Mr. Speaker, on several occasions we've heard this government state that they want to bring broadband service to all areas of the province. The Premier has stated publicly that he wants to achieve this goal by 2010. So, however, Mr. Speaker, this is 4 more years away, and many citizens and businesses need this technology now. In this current age of information technology, Mr. Speaker, what could be more important than having access to broadband technology? So my first question to the Minister of Economic Development is, Minister, many businesses are suffering because of another one of this government's half measures. Why do you continually place the accessibility to high-speed technology on your back burner?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Oh, Mr. Speaker, this is my lucky day, I guess. I'm very pleased to inform all members of this House there will be an announcement very, very soon on the broadband.
The Honourable Member for Clare on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, we're all looking forward to this one. Mr. Speaker, this is a matter of competition. Many of our companies are competing against other companies in the Maritimes and the rest of Canada and indeed the world. So how can we expect our companies to compete and increase our economic growth if we don't allow them access to high-speed internet? This is being hardest felt, Mr. Speaker, in rural Nova Scotia and specifically in areas like the Eastern Shore. One business owner stated, and I quote, "It is not very nice to ask small business along this shore to limp along for 4 more years." So again, my question to the Minister, will you commit to us today to speed up your timeline for province-wide access to broadband technology?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Mr. Speaker, I thought December 25th was next month, but apparently I'm getting a gift early. I can assure all members of this House, Mr. Speaker, that there will be an announcement very, very soon onto broadband in this province. And I can assure all members of this House and all Nova Scotians that the Premier of our province has made a commitment to all Nova Scotians, that they will have broadband in this province. And Mr. Speaker, to the dedication and the hard work of my staff and economic development, we will see that through, I want to tell you, and we're going to see it a lot faster than some members in this House realize.
The honourable member for Clare on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we know that the Premier has made a commitment by the year 2010. Well, Minister, this is about providing an environment for all our businesses to compete in a regional and global economy. So having to rely on a dial-up service is simply arcane and significantly diminishes the ability of our businesses to operate at a highly efficient level. So, Minister, your department has set a timeline that is far too long for province-wide access to high-speed internet. So, again, to the Minister is, will you, Mr. Minister, start to place internet and information technology as the top priority in your department?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Mr. Speaker, watch us. Guaranteed we will have broadband in this province before the time frame that the Premier announced earlier.
The time allotted for question period has expired. The Honourable Member for Coral Harbour, Eastern Passage, on Opposition Day business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can you please call resolution number 1024?
Resolution 1024. The Honourable Member for Queens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to speak to Resolution 1024. Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly support the efforts of the community and members of the Friends of Port Mattoon Bay in their working to preserve Port Mattoon Bay from the expansion of Aqua Fish Farm's current development. I have spoke to this issue many times in the form of several questions. Over the last couple of weeks, I've tabled a petition with well over 1,800 signatures, and I am looking for the support of this government, this House, to help this community protect Port Mattoon Bay. I can't express that any more firmly. This proposed expansion does not belong in Port Mattoon Bay for many, many reasons. We have 40 lobster boats with crews of at least 3 crew members on each boat in this area. We have about 27 mossing boats in this area. This is one of the most pristine areas in North America, according to the Aquaculture Association in Nova Scotia here. That is a grave concern for my communities, for the County of Queens. We all know that the municipality of Queens has taken a resolution with their council members, and they all are overwhelmingly in support of the Friends of Port Mattoon Bay. We have a lot to lose here, a lot to lose, and I want to ask the Minister of Fisheries to really seriously look at the possible and probable negative economic impacts that will be found if this expansion is to move forward. And the Minister has, in his power, in his discretion, to look at the economic impacts that could possibly happen to this very pristine area in my community. And I'd ask him to refer to the Fisheries and Coastal Resources Act, Chapter 25, Section 21(2), which gives him the power to have a full economic impact study done before making a final decision on this. And the information I tabled today, I want the Minister to take very seriously the environmental assessment process that was done in New Brunswick, especially the most recent one in 2005 going into 2006, that shows clearly that Aqua Fish Farms in New Brunswick has not been and has not demonstrated good stewardship in that province. And so therefore it is very important that this minister not only look at the environmental impacts of this company and look at what's happening in Port Mattoon Bay. Some of the economic impacts that we'll see happen is certainly the depletion of our fishery stocks, our lobster stocks. What I'm hearing from fishermen on the ground, what they're telling me is the immediate area around the existing expansion, they are seeing a dead zone. They are no longer lobster fishing in that particular area of the bay. They're having to go out further into the waters to get the same numbers of lobsters that they did several years ago when the first farm was established. This is a very unique harbor in the fact that it has been mapped showing a navigational channel, a port that has been mapped for generations. Not only is it a navigational harbor, but it also supports and harbors and acts as a safe haven for our lobster fishermen in times of need. When there's a storm in the area, those 40 fishing boats are taking turns moving their gear in and out of that harbor, in and around where this expansion is to be located. The area where the existing farm is today, the waters around that area, I am told and I have seen, I went out 2.5 years ago to this particular site, it is a dead zone.
Must be worse now.
There are no lobsters there, I'm told, from the local lobster fishermen. There are no scallops in that area, and the area is not the same as it used to be. Right. From the existing farm down towards Somerville Beach, one of the beaches in Queens County that make up our beautiful coastline of beaches. And I'm asking the minister to seriously look at that type of economic impact that it will have on our local fisheries in Queens County. I'm told that the mossmen, are not able to get the same levels of moss, harvesting their moss, because there is just simply none. It's vanishing in and around that area where the current site exists. So to have an expansion of 29 hectares, which is similar to or is 70 acres, is just incredible. The current farm consists of 8 pens. This expansion will see at least 40 pens out in that bay. That's a lot of pens and a lot of fecal matter. And I can tell you the presentation that I attended, there is no guarantee that that fecal matter will ever be remediated, not even through the fallowing process. And to the honourable member and to the minister, as I indicated in a drawing yesterday to you, that the fallowing process, there is a sediment that actually hangs in the balance. Not all of it is settling to the bottom of the ocean floor. There's a lot of that sediment that just hangs there. And with the tides and the currents, that's moving elsewhere. And there are no methods in our monitoring process that gives us good faith that it's not going elsewhere. Other economics, we have a budding tourism industry, and we have lots of residential growth in that area. And those are all the economic impacts that we'll have. You need to do something, Mr. Minister. I'm asking your government to support my communities, Port Mattoon Bay and the County of Queens and the municipality in supporting and protecting this bay. Thank you.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to this resolution number 1024, and I thank the member opposite for bringing this resolution forward. As you know, Mr. Speaker, there has been considerable public debate on this topic, and I have heard from many people. Some people do not want the site, and others are in support of it. I have also heard of the reasons why people don't want it, and I have learned of the reasons why people do want it. This is obviously a very sensitive issue in Queens County and surrounding areas, and I appreciate that everyone has their own views. I would like to take a minute to talk about the aquaculture industry in general. Aquaculture, I feel, is a perfect fit for Nova Scotia in many ways. It not only provides jobs and economic benefit to coastal regions, but it encourages youth to stay in coastal communities. It provides opportunities for spin-off service industries. It utilizes existing infrastructures, and it must demonstrate environmental responsibility to coexist with the ecosystem that provide the waters to grow fish. The Nova Scotia aquaculture industry takes a diversified approach to development, cultivating not only Atlantic salmon and mussels, but also steelhead trout, oysters, Arctic char, clams, abalone, halibut, and cod. Nova Scotia is not alone in this industry. In fact, the food and agriculture
Organization of the United Nations stated recently that nearly half the fish consumed as food worldwide are raised on farms rather than caught in the wild. While in 1980, just 9% of the fish consumed by human beings came from aquaculture, today 43% does. Wild fish catches have not increased in the past several years, and there are fears that wild stocks may decline further. Aquaculture, I feel, is the answer to provide fish to feed the world and meet the increasing demands that we have. As well, Nova Scotia aquaculturists have invested heavily on industry diversification. For example, in less than a decade, Nova Scotia has become a world leader in halibut hatchery and nursery husbandry, and is poised to become a key supplier of juvenile halibut as well as market fish to domestic and international buyers. Other alternate species cultured mainly for niche markets include Arctic char, abalone, and Pacific sablefish operation currently under development. Marine salmon aquaculture currently accounts for approximately 67% of the total value of fish farming in Nova Scotia. Although the province's coastline is extensive, only certain areas are acceptable to year-round farming of these species due to a phenomenon of extremely cold water called superchill. To overcome this hurdle, development opportunities lie in farmers utilizing existing suitable sites and bays to their full potential, as well as the constant exploration of prospective new sites and technical solutions. Advances in aquaculture technology, including new feed formulations, containment cage construction, shellfish hatcheries, and tank farm water treatment mechanisms, have the potential to open new development opportunities which until recently have not been economically or biophysically possible. In concert with new species development, Nova Scotia aquatic farmers are leading the way in advancement of applied technology. Nova Scotia's aquaculture's total farm gate production and value in 2005 was over 9 million kgs of product and $44 million respectively, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there is currently 379 issued aquaculture licenses in Nova Scotia, including the cultivation of Atlantic salmon, rainbow trout, brook trout, Arctic char, halibut, cod, sablefish, blue mussels, American oyster, European oyster scallops, clams, and abalone. And Nova Scotia's aquaculture supports 900 direct jobs and an additional 1,400 indirect jobs, generating a total payroll of somewhere around $50 million per year. Recent federal provincial initiatives, including the Aquaculture Framework Agreement, hope to address some of the above challenges through clarifying roles and responsibilities, improving regulatory harmonization, advancing business risk safety nets, marketing initiatives, research and innovation, development and commercialization, and, Mr. Speaker, infrastructure. The Eastern Canadian aquaculture industries produce some of the safest and the healthiest shellfish and finfish in the world. We have a fish veterinarian to assist aquatic farmers with monitoring their fish health. It is a well-managed system of care. Mr. Speaker, fish and all animals require health care, and we ensure that if vaccines or medicated feeds are required, it is only administered under the supervision of a qualified veterinarian. Mr. Speaker, the benefits of omega-3 fatty acids are important to our well-being, and the farming of finfish has helped to make a healthy food product more affordable and readily available year-round. It is common practice for the industry to use a monitoring system, such as underwater cameras, while feeding fish to ensure proper distribution of feed. I understand the environmental impact of typically localized beneath the site, impact to biodegradable and reversible when farmers use a fallowing system to reduce the impact. Mr. Speaker, I realize my time may be getting short, so I may and the industry is still a young industry, and there is much we have to learn about the opportunities and the impacts, positive and negative. Right now, Mr. Speaker, the communities near Port Mattoon aquaculture site are wrestling with this project. And I want to reassure my colleague that there is a rigorous process before a decision is made. We have monitored the existing site for several years, And the plan is to make the environmental data for 204, 205 available shortly. And Mr. Speaker, the data collected in 2006 will be available in early February. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to meeting with my colleague from Queens, as well as the group from Port Mattoon right after this debate. Thank you.
Thank you. The honourable member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I, too, am glad to stand and speak on Resolution 1024. And I say that because I love fish. I've been around the fish all my life. I fished for 35 years. I've been in the tourism for quite a number of years. And yes, and that'll be next, whatever. Yes, I won't repeat that. But I think there's times and there's places, Mr. Speaker, for everything on this earth. I believe there's time and a place for tourism. There's a time and place for fishing. There's a time and place for a beautiful area to be saved. And there's a time and a place to grow fish. Because if we don't grow fish, our oceans will never, ever keep up with the demand. We've seen that. You know, we'll blame each other for wiping it out and wiping it out. But if the demand wasn't in the world for that, we wouldn't have been out there catching them. We can't feed the world out of the ocean, Mr. Speaker. It's as simple as that. So we have to grow fish. I'll mention Port Mattoon. I haven't really seen the areas or the site, but what I'm hearing about it sounds like something that may have happened in the New Brunswick aquaculture industry. The New Brunswick aquaculture industry got overcrowded. People were putting cages around the island, end to end to end, and after a while, they got so crowded that the diseases started in them. And they couldn't stop it. And once they would stop one disease, another disease would come in it. Anything that you overcrowd will die in the wild or in captivity. Because when you get a vaccine for one disease, another disease will come along, and they can't keep up with it. So in New Brunswick, they had to thin it out. They had to thin that out to make that work. And that's something that we cannot do here in Nova Scotia. In 1994, I helped set up an aquaculture site as a fisherman. The first thing I'd done was put it out of the sight of people. That was the first thing. The next thing I'd done, worked at with others, was to put it on bottom, over the bottom, where there was the least amount of fishing ever done. And that's where we found a site for that area. There's sites all around this province to do that. The industry can grow. The Chinese have been growing fish for 3,000 years. And we are buying fish from China to eat in this province. There's something wrong there. Okay, on land. It's been proposed to go on to the land. We will run into the same thing. I'll go to Weymouth, Nova Scotia for a minute. We have mink on the land down there, raising mink. Everybody said, put the mink back at Weymouth, put them out of sight, back in the woods, everything will be all right. But it's not all right. The people are still complaining. You can't, the hog farms, the mink ranches, now the aquaculture. But one thing we can't do, we cannot overcrowd. We cannot crowd out beautiful areas. We cannot crowd out traditional fishermen. And we cannot crowd out ecotourism on the shores. We all have to have room for this. We have to grow fish. So what is going to be done is just the way I've explained it. And it can work. If we don't do something like this on our shores, Nova Scotia is a perfect place to grow fish. It's a natural place to grow fish. Whether it's in places around our coast that's not harming anything, whether it's inland, whether it's offshore 100 miles. That is also being looked at. But we have got to do it. We've got to have fish. It's the best, the most healthiest fish on earth. And we have got to, I guess I'm running out of time, Mr. Speaker. I'm sorry. I could probably go on for a while longer yet. But anyway, I just want to say one thing before I sit down.
The honourable member has approximately a minute and a half.
One thing before I sit down. We can't try to push each other around in Nova Scotia in these coastal areas. We can all sit down to the table and we can all make this work with just a few suggestions. There's not a problem in this world, in this province, that you cannot work out and make everybody happy. For every problem, there's a solution. There always was and always will be. Thank you very much.
The honourable member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm really pleased to have an opportunity to speak to this resolution. I want to say, and I want the people of Port Mattoon who are here to understand a couple things about me. One is that I'm a farmer, so I can think about my first notions actually of. Some years ago when I first heard people talk about farming fish, and I thought, what a great idea. I'm also a sheep farmer, and I know Port Mattoon Harbour is not favorable to raising sheep. I guess it has a history of that. So, but I want to say there is something that has gone on in recent years in my constituency, in particular, because we produce 30% of the milk that people drink in this province, in the constituency of Hants East. And we also have one of the most rapidly growing residential areas east of Montreal. So this would definitely seem like an area that would be prone to conflict, Mr. Speaker. And one thing that I've come to believe in doing this work, because I've gone to the public 4 times and asked them to re-elect me. So I think they believe that I represent them. And something that is important to me, and I think important to my colleague and all my colleagues, is the idea that people should have some say in what happens to their communities. And for me, it wouldn't matter if a fish farm was generating clean water. If the people didn't want it, that should be enough to stop it, Mr. Speaker. So I do worry about food supply. Actually, this recent report that came out, Mr. Speaker, that told about the total collapse, the imminent total collapse of the oceans by 2050. I think as politicians, we should be very concerned about what it is that we do to the oceans and what we do to our environment in general. And it's obvious that from the member from Digby-Annapolis, he made some good points, but it's obvious that we're going to have to grow fish to feed people because we're not going to be able to get it all from the ocean, Mr. Speaker. That's clear. It's clear now that we can't do it. But, I mean, not all aspects of the aquaculture industry seem to have been problematic for communities. Certainly the shellfish side, mussels and so on, this doesn't seem to have run into the same opposition that the finfish industry has run into. And I think that at first it seemed like a great idea, but communities started to recognize problems. The industry started to recognize problems, and my colleague from Digby-Annapolis indicated about if you crowd too many animals, and we certainly know from all the forms of industrial agriculture and so on what kind of problems that creates. But the question still remains, can you grow food, can you grow fish, and do it on land and still do it in an economically viable way. And if the province can't answer that question, maybe they should beef up their extension department and their production technology department that came out of Department of Agriculture, and share some of that with Department of Fisheries, and put some people in place to actually do a couple of pilot projects and see whether or not that they could actually establish an on-land facility that would be viable. And if we're going to talk about jobs, I mean, the question has to be, what are those jobs worth to the community? And if 1,800 people in Port Mattoon, in that area, sign petitions saying they don't want this expansion, then I think somebody should be listening to them. And Mr. Speaker, I can table a photocopy out of this if you wish. Strong Leadership, A Clear Course. I don't know if you recognize this booklet, but this was the Tory election campaign in 1999. I'll just quote from page 19, Making Government Accountable. We believe Nova Scotians are right to demand greater openness, accountability, and participation. A John Ham government will be a government that listens to Nova Scotians and acts in accordance with their priorities and expectations. So, Mr. Speaker, now I know that Premier Ham is not here any longer, but this, I think, set the tone in 1999 when the government changed and became a Conservative government. And I think that this government should take a lesson from somebody's book. They don't seem to want to take one from the New Democrats, but they won't even take one from their own. In 1999, when they formed a government, they were a majority government. In 2003, they were a minority. In 2006, they were a smaller minority. And there are issues that people tried to send them a message on, Mr. Speaker. And one of them was the Digby Quarry. That the people of Digby tried to make a statement, we don't want the Digby Quarry. And what did that result in? They lost a Conservative minister and elected the member that sits in the House today. Now, Mr. Speaker, there's the issue of strip mining in Cape Breton, and this is another area that it seems that the government is quite willing to allow strip mining to continue or to occur in Cape Breton, and yet the people in that area do not want it. They've indicated that time and time again, and yet this government has refused to listen. So, Mr. Speaker, I think the role of politicians, because this role is a unique role, we go to the people and we ask them to vote for us. We ask them to make a commitment on what we've pledged we will do for them. And then we come to this House of Assembly, and the members of the Conservative Party and members of the Liberal Party have formed governments in this province. And yet, when these issues arise, they don't want to listen to the people who elected them. And that, Mr. Speaker, is serious. And at some point, I guess that's when we throw governments out. They say governments are not elected; they're just thrown out. So I can't understand why, in the 21st century, with all that we know and all that government should know around some of the problems that have been associated with fish farms, why they wouldn't be interested, number one, to listen to the community that doesn't want it. Number two, be willing to do some research for the benefit of Nova Scotians, for the benefit of communities, and for the benefit of the industry to see if there's another way to carry out fish farming in this province and produce what they seem to term as a viable industry. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much.
Thank you. Time has expired for debate on Resolution 1024. The Honourable, the Official Opposition House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can you please call resolution number 1033?
Resolution 1033. The Honourable Member for Pictou East.
Mr. Speaker, first I would like to thank the Minister of, before thanking the Minister, I would like to thank the member from Clare for following in my footsteps in relationship to seeking province-wide access to broadband. And then I would like to thank the minister for his remarks that it will be faster than some members realize. And I sure hope that it is fast enough to assist the residents of Barney's River in Pictou East. The resolution that I put forward, Mr. Speaker, in part was many rural areas in Nova Scotia are suffering from lack of high-speed internet service. The Community Access Program, CAP, is being threatened through federal cutbacks. Numerous rural communities are at a distinct disadvantage from not having high-speed internet, while others fear a loss of the Community Access Program. And in that resolution, I ask that this House of Assembly go on record in support of extending high-speed internet services and the maintenance of CAP in this province. Now, Mr. Speaker, earlier I tabled a resolution and a petition. The petition was signed by 63 residents from the Barneys River area of Pictou County, including the owners and operators of lumbering and trucking interests that transport internationally from that area. Now, Mr. Speaker, looking over the list of those that have signed this petition, there are more per capita businesses in that area than in most areas of Nova Scotia. I look at G&B Williams Enterprises Limited. They're involved in international trucking. They have some new forms that are coming into play for shipping into the United States, and they claim that it will take hours to fill those forms out in a dial-up system. I look at M&R Ross Logging Limited, Williams Brothers Limited, C&G Williams Bulldozing, Mill River Trucking, Mountain View Resources, collectively over 100 employees in those. I scan the list and I see Kevin Thompson, one of the leading fish harvesters in that area and also has other business interests. I look over the list and see Gordon Anderson, the Education Committee Chair of the Chignecto School Board, Linda Williams, a teacher, Lois Thompson, a teacher. This is an area that needs high-speed internet service, and it needs it fast. What I would like to see happen, Mr. Speaker, is that immediately there be an expansion to the Cumberland County pilot project. I believe that we could have several pilots at various levels of completion while awaiting provincial-wide broadband service. And that is what I am asking this government for. Some more pilot projects, including Barneys River on the very top of the list. Now, I want to very quickly jump to the situation involving the CAP program. And I know I only have a couple of minutes to speak, but looking at the CAP sites that exist in this province, 279 CAP sites in this province. My wife and I operated a bed and breakfast for 5 years in Lewisburg, spending for most of those years time in Pictou County in the winter months. And to see displaced fish plant workers' children in the library there, looking up information for their homework, playing games, no computers at home. I just don't understand the right-wing agenda of the Stephen Harper government, Mr. Speaker, and I sure hope that we can do something in this province to counter that agenda. We cannot allow our communities, our rural communities, to experience higher levels of outmigration from farming communities, from fishing communities, from forestry-based communities. We need, Mr. Speaker, to have things like access to internet services to keep people in those communities. It is of paramount importance, Mr. Speaker. So in closing, I want to say that the minister should move as quickly as possible on province-wide access, but please, please consider some pilot projects in places like Barney's River so that these people will not operate at a great disadvantage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to stand in my place today and debate Resolution 1033. Mr. Speaker, as we all realize, we had an election this year, and there was not a promise, there was a commitment made by our Premier and this government, and that was on broadband internet service across our province. And our Premier made the commitment to all Nova Scotians that we would have broadband in this province by the year 2010. Well, I'm very pleased, Mr. Speaker, to let members know, as I did in question period today, that this is coming much faster than we ever anticipated. We will be making a good news announcement in this province on a pilot project in the very, very near future, Mr. Speaker. And with that announcement, I think that there will be some real spin-offs from that announcement. Mr. Speaker, I have traveled this province as the Minister of Economic Development. I've talked to small business. I've spoken to municipalities and to RDAs, and that has been a concern from one end of the province to the other. And I understand that concern, Mr. Speaker, because I happen to have been a small business owner, operator for a number of years, and we won't go into how many years. But I know that we need the infrastructure in this province to grow small business in rural Nova Scotia. I realize that as being, as I said earlier, a small business owner. We need all the tools to work in rural Nova Scotia to maintain and enhance the economy with all over this great province of ours. And Mr. Speaker, I can say one thing, that I do not believe throwing rocks at the federal government is a way to have good dialogue with the federal government. I believe in having good open dialogue with the federal government, and Mr. Speaker, I have started that dialogue. I have started that dialogue with the Honourable Peter MacKay, and I've also had good conversations with the Minister of Industry. And, you know, I'm optimistic, Mr. Speaker, that we will have a continued service with the CAP services in this province. This government and our Premier and this Minister understands how important those CAP sites are in this province. There are 279 of them, as the previous speaker mentioned. And we know how important they are to every area of our great province. And that's why I have decided to have good dialogue with my federal partners, not to go in and beat up on them, but to have good dialogue and let them know how important it is to every area and every community in this province of ours, that we must maintain that service and enhance it in any way we possibly can. This government saw the need this year to put extra funding, an extra $100,000 into the CAP services, Mr. Speaker, to make sure that we maintain the level of service for this fiscal year. And I am very, very optimistic that we will have this service in the out years. But in having that, that's by having good dialogue with our federal counterparts and making sure that they understand the importance to rural Nova Scotia, how important it is to small business. And as I said earlier, I can definitely speak on small business as being have been a small business owner for a number of years. Mr. Speaker, there are two carriers in our province, Alliant and Eastlink. They've had the opportunity, but they could not find a tool to do it without subsidy. Mr. Speaker, that's why we put an RFP out. And we have had good response back from the RFP. And next week, I hope that we will be able to be in a position to make the announcement on who will be getting that contract, Mr. Speaker. And I think it will be an excellent project, and I ask all members to watch as it unfolds and watch how rapidly I think that we can increase the service across this great province of ours, Mr. Speaker. There are numerous communities. You know, I've been to Queens. I've heard the issue in Queens. I've been to the Strait area. I've been in the Cape Breton area. I've been all over. And every RDA in every community has asked us about the broadband, Mr. Speaker, in your home riding. You know how important it is in the back and to the mink ranches in the backland, how important they need high-speed internet for their delivery of their services and to see where the markets are, you know, and that's why this government has taken the initiative, and we made not a promise, as I said earlier, a commitment to Nova Scotians, and we will live to that commitment, and we are intending to fast-track that as fast as we possibly can. With this pilot project, I think that we will iron out any wrinkles that may be within that contract so that we can fast-track the next one that comes out, Mr. Speaker. But I really believe that we must work with our communities. We must work with our RDAs. Our RDAs is a great tool for each and every member of this legislature to work with. They are a tool, they are a lobbyist group that, for all levels of government, and they have a proven track record. They have an association that is working for the whole province and for the good of the province. They know the needs of their community. You know, and in my home community, I can tell you our library right on the main street of Yarmouth. I go in there and I see students from my high school, Mr. Speaker. I see seniors in there in the evenings using the high-speed internet at the campsites, and I know how important it is to them. And we must enhance it and maintain it. And I'm sure that each and every member can relate to issues in their community on the campsites, how important it is, and what we must do. But we must do it cooperatively, all members of the House. We must work together to enhance all of Nova Scotia and create a better environment for, because when we have a better environment and we're growing the economy of our great province, everybody benefits, Mr. Speaker. And I'm not talking only HRM or CBRM, I'm talking every region of our province. And I believe that cooperatively, and I don't care what color stripe any member of this House wears, I think we all have a job. And the job is not to just throw rocks at one another. Our job is to work as cooperatively as we possibly can to enhance every community in our province. I can relate to the member from Shelburne. I know he has issues in his community, and my job is to work with that member and all members in the House. He has an issue with the wharf in his community, and it's been brought to my attention. And I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, and all members, that we are doing what we possibly can to address that concern and numerous other concerns. Mr. Speaker, in your home riding, there's a couple issues that's been brought to my attention, and I want to have some good dialogue with you and have your input into it, as we should all be doing in this House. So with those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I can assure very rapidly.
Thank you. The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and it's a pleasure for me to talk today on this resolution that's before us. And the resolution is about two things. It's about internet access across the high-speed internet access across the province, and it is also about the CAP program and the threats that we are currently under in terms of the funding and the continuation of CAP. And I thought it very important today, Mr. Speaker, to talk about our last Human Resource Committee meeting, which was held just earlier this month. And at that meeting, we had two people come to tell us about what the CAP program is really all about here in our province, what it means to the many communities that host the CAP program. One of the people who came was Charlotte Janes, and she's president of the Nova Scotia Library Association, and with her was Eric Stackhouse, and he's, I believe, a volunteer. He's chair of the Nova Scotia CAP Association. And it was a fascinating meeting because I think all of us, all members, learned a great deal about how our program here in Nova Scotia differs from other provinces and why it is so central to our communities. And I think as we talk about the need for high-speed internet access, that is understood that we need high-speed broadband across the province because information is It's not only knowledge, it's the key to everything in our society today. Information is king. And if you're living in a rural area and you can't get information, it's going to impact your studies, your training, your communication with others, your business. It has tremendous negative impacts if you can't take your place alongside all of the other businesses and all the other communities in the world, because essentially the world is open to us through the internet. So that's a given. But I want to go to the CAP site, Mr. Speaker, because the CAP sites in Nova Scotia are the window to the world for those communities. And they provide the access to information to people who don't have access to their own computer or who don't have as good a hookup. Some of them around the province actually are now hooked up not through broadband but by satellite, so it's a little faster than the dial-up. So they may choose to go there because it's a better connection. But I think what was so important to me was to realize that in Nova Scotia, the program has developed differently than in other provinces. And I think one of the most telling things that was said was with these imminent cuts or the threats of further cuts and even the complete destruction of this program, Nova Scotians have been sending lots of letters to the federal government and to their, I'm sure, to the provincial ministers. But it was said in that meeting that 90% of the complaints going to the federal government are coming from Nova Scotia. And I think that's pretty amazing that our province, which is 3% of the population of this country, is making by far the loudest noise about what this will mean if we lose those CAP sites. And what are we talking about? There's around 270 CAP sites in our province. And I know we talk a lot about the rural areas and their access to information. But don't forget the urban areas as well, because we have a lot of people who can't afford their own computers. A lot of people are at our HRM libraries and at the community centers and senior centers that host CAP sites right here in the metro area. And for them, this is a tremendous opportunity for training and for exploring and expanding their horizons. And I know some of them are at senior centers, as I mentioned, Mr. Speaker, and for those seniors, one of the nicest pictures that I saw in the whole presentation was a picture of a woman who's in her 90s who actually had a headset on at the CAP site, and she was communicating with her grandchildren in Western Canada. And this, to her, this was in a rural area, mind you, but she had been able to go to a CAP site, learn about the technology, and be able to drop in there and speak to her family that are far-flung now. And I think that you cannot put a price tag on that, on what that means to her and how much it improves her life and her quality of life to be in touch. And that's just one example. So there are elderly people that are learning how to use the web to keep in touch and to keep, current on things, which is very good for their health and their socializing and everything. Well, another thing that was said about the rural CAP sites is they often become a center where people gather, because we don't have post offices in these communities anymore. We often don't have a general store. There's so many of the places that people would otherwise have socialized that are gone, and the CAP site becomes a place where people drop in and are really able to socialize and keep in touch. So I wanted to make sure that we talked about the seniors and how much this means to them. If talking about the CAP sites, Mr. Speaker, you could not miss the fact that a lot of young people are hired through the CAP Youth Program, which is an affiliate program. But if the CAP sites go, there will be no youth program to hire young people and to have those young people training the older people and the others in the community. So the employment impact, again, especially in rural areas, but throughout the province, hiring students is an important thing, and having them connect with the rest of the community is very positive. That will go as well, Mr. Speaker. What was different, and I think I should go back to why it seems that Nova Scotia has made so much noise about the threatened cuts. And I think what is important is to acknowledge that here in Nova Scotia we have a provincial partner, and that is the Office of Economic Development. That was made clear in the presentation that in other provinces it was seen as just a federal program, and they didn't get the buy-in from the provincial government. That's made a huge difference here, and it has helped. However, although the minister over there is pleased, I'm happy to give a compliment when it's due. At the same time, what we have to do is fight. We really have to fight harder to make sure that this is not dismantled, that we don't lose it, because even the uncertainty right now in the next months was made very clear to us in that meeting that the volunteers who are the heart and soul of this program can't keep going without some assurance of funding. And Mr. Speaker, before I close, I'd just like to mention that in terms of the government money invested in campsites, we were told at the meeting that the return is 9-to-1 with the volunteer time and the donated space that's given for our for the campsites across the province. So this is a tremendously positive investment for federal and provincial money, and I would suggest that we have to work very hard to continue to support it. So I would urge the minister to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. The honourable member for Halifax, Shabukto.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I'm quite prepared to take the honourable minister at his word. Something is coming, some announcement will be made. We don't know what it is, and understandably, it'll be some, we hope, short time until we actually hear details from the minister. Our focus today is on the problem with the possible shutdown of campsites throughout the 279 locations in Nova Scotia in which they exist. Our focus is also on the expansion of broadband internet access throughout communities in Nova Scotia, especially, of course, rural communities. We look forward to what it is that the minister will announce. We don't know whether he'll be saying that the provincial government will take up whatever financial slack is left if the federal government does continue to abandon the CAP program. It would be unfortunate if the federal government persisted in reducing its financial commitment, but it would also be a good thing, of course, if the province were to step in and take up whatever responsibility was left to it by the federal government. We don't know whether any announcement to come from the minister will relate to something beyond the campsites. We don't know whether it will extend to broadband. We don't know whether it will perhaps be more experimental or short-term or trial sites located in some parts of rural Nova Scotia. We don't know whether it will be a commitment to full-scale broadband at a more accelerated rate than was originally promised by the government when it identified 2010 as the year by which it hoped to have broadband in place throughout the whole province. We just don't know. It seems to me that that's the range of possible kinds of announcements that may come from the government. We look forward to it, and the minister certainly seemed very earnest in his promise that something was coming. I noted, however, that no particular date was given by the minister. It's open. He's clearly aware that this is something of concern in rural areas, and indeed when at the Committee on Economic Development, we held hearings on this matter the last week. We heard that Nova Scotians had registered their concerns about the possible winding up of the CAP program in great numbers. So clearly the government has heard that message. But I want to raise a context. I want to raise a context within which this question comes forward. Quite clearly what this is all about whether it's campsites or whether it's broadband internet access, it all has to do with linkage to the world at large through our computers. Now, this is crucial. This is a crucial matter whether your interest is business development, economic development, cultural awareness, family connections, or any other purpose. And if the rural areas are to be on anything like an equal footing with the urban areas, then this seems like a starting point when it comes to setting up a system that would begin to give them something of a leg up. The economic advantages that go with having a dense population in urban areas are very difficult for rural areas to overcome. And it's not that there's isn't a great deal to come from rural areas. Clearly they are. And yet at the same time, we have to ask ourselves, will this be enough? Will it be enough if we get maintenance of our campsites? Will it be enough even if broadband internet expands throughout the whole of Nova Scotia, including every piece of the rural areas? And I don't think it is. And I worry because I see a pattern which suggests to me that we have to ask ourselves the question, has the government at some point quietly decided to abandon rural areas in Nova Scotia? Have they simply decided that that a low level of maintenance is what's on the agenda for the coming years, rather than any serious attempt at robust development. And that's a serious issue. It's a serious public policy issue. It's one which, if the government thinks it should head in that direction, it should articulate clearly so that it can be debated. Now, I'm a person who thinks that that would not be a good idea. I see the economic problems. I see how it becomes much more expensive to support programs in areas with sparser populations. But at the same time, I don't believe that we as a province should even remotely consider writing off the rural areas. Yet consider the evidence. Consider what it is that has actually occurred here. If you look at our rural communities, there has been enormous depopulation. There has been a change in demographics so that those people who are left there are significantly older. We see school closures. We see higher unemployment rates than in the urban areas. We see businesses closing. We see problems with fuel outlets. We see the cyclical nature of the natural resource sectors, which have been the mainstay of rural Nova Scotia for many years, having an impact on the sectors that have traditionally been vibrant in those areas. There is a serious problem, and I don't see that this government has taken active steps to deal with them. They, in fact, have been very passive. Consider only something like the fishery. There is no clear indication that the government is doing anything active with respect to fish plants that's productive. We don't see them stepping up to the plate and speaking publicly and aggressively about maintaining fish stocks. And so it goes. When you look at agriculture, when you see forestry, pulp and paper, there have been missed opportunities on the part of the government. I think that this problem about broadband and the cap sites has to be seen in the context of the government backing away from rural areas